Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this Tamarack Institute webinar. My name is Jean-Marie Chapeau, and I am Director of Impact Evaluation at Tamarack. And I will be your MC today for this webinar. This webinar is a part of five that talk to us about where we will see together rather a number of projects that have been supported by Tamarack. So we will be speaking about all of that today with our guests. First of all, I would like to begin by thanking the Secretariat Relations Canadiennes. They are our main partnership for this series of webinars, and thanks to them, we have simultaneous interpretation into English today. So I would like to say hello to our interpreter, Nathalie, and I promise to speak as slowly as possible, which is difficult for me. That being said, I will try. I am from Jojagi, which is known as Montreal. So this is the unceded territory of one of the First Nations. And I also wanted to share with you my personal commitment with respect to reconciliation. I'm trying to be practical with respect to everything related to the Indigenous context, which enables me to really have a better understanding and to have a better relationship with the First Nations. And that is one of the ways that I am committed to reconciliation. And I'd like to invite you to indicate in the chat section if you would like to indicate where you're joining us from. So a few words with respect to Tamarack. Tamarack is above all a learning center, and we work around 5 interrelated practices that we believe lead to real change in communities, and I will speak about these later. And Tamarack is also a network of vibrant communities, and that allows local leaders to be able to establish a change in a number of areas, including reducing poverty, strengthening the social fabric, building youth futures, and ensuring a just and equitable climate transition. So if you want to know more about Tamarack, I'd invite you to visit our website, and there is a French and version of our site as well. So you are welcome to join us on that website. So it's my great pleasure to now speak to the 3 panelists, Carmen Gabriel-Chouinard, Maxime Thibault-Vézina, Gabriel Salathé-Beaulieu. So I invite you to introduce yourselves, who you are, what your organization is, and what your position is within those organization. So Carmen, how about you go ahead and start? Hello, everyone. So my name is Carmen, and I work at Dynamo as a strategic advisor, and I have a background in assessment and evaluation. My name is Gabriel Salathé-Beaulieu, and I've been working at the TIESS since 2016, and I've been working on evaluating social impact, measuring social innovation as well. So very happy to be associated with this project. Gabriel, can you tell us what TIESS means? Yes, Territoire innovant en économie sociale et solidaire. Hello, Maxime Thibault-Vézina. Recently, I am responsible for the Montreal Urban Innovation Laboratory for the City of Montreal. And of course, that's part of the City of Montreal that is looking at social innovation, and that also manages the program that we're here to discuss today, Montreal in Common. Thank you. Thank you to all 3 of you, Jean-Marie and Maxime. Let's start with you. I would like to ask you a first question, basically to set up this discussion today. So what is Montreal in Common, and what are its objectives? Montréal en commun is a program of social innovation that was launched in 2019 after the City of Montreal won the federal competition as smart cities. A number of people have heard about this. As one of the first recipients of the program, it allowed the City of Montreal to launch a $50 million program over 6 years to better support about 12, in fact, more than 12 innovative projects that involved a large number of organizations, not-for-profit organizations, universities, and others. And all of these organizations worked in partnership with the City of Montreal, and we had two major components: access to food and also sustainable mobility. So what we want to do is to be able to promote technological and social innovation in order to be able to promote these objectives. The project that was put forward has been managed since 2019 by the Montreal Urban Innovation Laboratory. And this program suggests that it will experiment a number of different approaches. And we want approaches that are really centered on the human chain. So in this network of partners, we want to be able to work with citizens in order to find technological solutions that have been developed with the communities, not only for communities. So on the graphic here, you can see that there are a number of projects that are underway, and we have a number of goals with the theory of change. What we're trying to do here is to find neighborhood mobility solutions, amongst others. With respect to neighborhood mobility programs, we've been working with the organization Solon, and also we've been working on a specific platform that allows people in a neighborhood to bring together a number of mobility, a number of ways to move around, either by sharing cars or bikes, etc. But also there is a number of projects with respect to food, a number of organizations working together in order to increase production, distribution of food throughout Montreal. And it allows us actually to bring together resources, including trucks, storage areas, and as well as kitchens. So it allows us to bring together a number of infrastructures to help with the food. But also we want to be able to implement a number of regulatory and experimentation. We want to be able to develop platforms, technological platforms, in order to be able to make it easier for users to find, for example, mobility solutions. For example, being able to use your cell phone for a number of projects. So what we're betting on is that there are collaboration approaches with non-government organizations, universities. We want to be able to promote as well certain solutions based on social data, and we want to be able to find solutions with respect to the environment in Montreal. When we speak about social inclusion in the city, that is very much a part of our project. The project has some approaches that are institutional, because we want to be able to bring some of those social innovation approaches within the innovation, and also to encourage learning. But we want people to be able to participate, to be able to help the program evolve as well. All of these principles, they are principles that the city wants to be able to use in its strategic planning, namely with respect to Montreal 2030. And Montreal in common wants to be one of the levers that can be used with respect to this strategic plan. Thank you, Maxime, says Jean-Marie. This is a very interesting project. It's very diversified. You bring together a number of partners, and also the evaluation is really at the heart of your principles. So we will speak about evaluation a little more, but the city decided to bring in two partners, TIESS, TIESS, and Dynamo. And I would like to ask you this question to both of these organizations. What is the assessment process with respect to the approach, the methodology, the roles, and complementary of the two organizations that have participated in this project? This is Carmen. For the evaluation process, at the beginning of 2020, we worked together, TIESS and Dynamo, and we had wanted to work together for a while, but instead of putting together separate requests to the city, we took advantage of that opportunity to be to work together to develop an evaluation approach, an evaluation process. So the TIESS has a lot of information had a lot of background with respect to social innovation, and Dynamo has a lot of information of working with various groups in order to be able to evaluate projects in a participative project. So we work together, both of our organizations, in order to be able to evaluate Montreal in common. And there are a number of components associated with the process. The first component is the evaluation process as such. And we have processes that is a process rather that's based on a participative approach. And I'll be able to speak about that a little later. But basically, what we're talking about when we talk about participative approach is to involve a number of stakeholders in a project, a program, or a policy in order to be able subsequently to use the results of a program. We also have an evolutionary approach. Maxime spoke about this earlier. And this is an approach that is based on following the projects to evaluate the projects. For example, the team members who are involved in the project throughout all of the project, because the team members might be applying certain new approaches. So we work with the team members of the project and we're able to document what's happening throughout the project and by asking the right questions. For example, what do we want to learn? In order to be able to move forward, in order that we can learn and readjust. And the last approach that I can speak about and that we use very much is also an approach that's based on users' experience. So the result of an evaluation must serve a certain purpose, because if they don't serve a purpose and if they're not useful, then why are we doing an evaluation? That's actually the reason why we undertake evaluation. Our worst nightmare is that our evaluation report will be put on a shelf and not used. So the evaluation report allows us to ask the question, who will benefit from this evaluation and the results of the evaluation? So we always keep that in mind throughout the process. So that's what I wanted to say about evaluation, but we also have a role in Montreal in common in order to, with respect to capacity building, and there are a number of aspects related to that. So we have an evaluation committee that we work with, but last year we also set up a community of practice, and this community really aims to share the results of the evaluation of Montreal in Commun, to be able to share the experience of all of the stakeholders in the project. When you speak about the project partners, are you talking about some of the stakeholders that Maxime was speaking to us about, or are you speaking about the team that's involved in Montreal in Common? This is Carmen. Actually, in our community of practice, we have our partners, and these are the projects that are being funded by the program that's called Montreal in Common. So there are about 13 or 14 of those partners, but there are also a number of members from the Montreal Urban Innovation Laboratory team. So all of those partners are part of our community of practice. So I just wanted to make a last point on this with respect to all of the transfer of information. What we want is to be able to go to obtain learnings and to be able to transfer them to others. So there's a whole component as well. This is Jean-Marc Jean-Marie. So you spoke to us an approach that as participative, that's evolutionary as well, but also that is that aims to ensure that the users are involved. So can you tell us what the main advances and effects of this participatory evaluation to date? Yes, actually, says Carmen, if you look at the slide here, we work on with a number of loops. So we work with an evaluation committee. So that's the first step. It's the creation of evaluation committee that includes all of the representatives from all of the funding organizations and the Montreal Urban Innovation Lab. Here we ask, what do we need to know? What kind of information do we need in order to be able to evolve, in order to adjust the program moving forward? So that's where we can get that information in the evaluation committee. And then when we are collecting data, of course, the partners are involved in that and also in the interpretation of the data. So the participatory evaluation is very much at the front here. So once that we've collected the data, we're able to have preliminary results. And that's a really important part of the participatory evaluation. It's important to involve everybody that's closely involved to the program so that they're able to come and interpret with us what the results are. We want to make sure that the results are well aligned with the objectives of the program. That's great. So participation of these partners in all of these steps. So now that you have done a great job at describing the evaluation strategy, maybe I could turn the floor over to Gabriel. So what are the main takeaways right now with respect to this participatory approach? So this is the third year of our evaluation. So we were talking about the fact that we use loops, and now we're in the third loop. So in the first step, we looked at the principles. And when Maxime spoke about the project Montreal in Common, he said that there were a number of principles that we apply, number of principles that allow us to bring together a number of projects in the area of mobility and food. So we wanted to be able to see what the questions that we asked, rather, we wanted to be able to look at collaboration and the involvement of citizens. We also wanted to know whether or not the theories were well understood. And during the second year, we asked ourselves this question: how would the data and technology can be used to support the program's vision. So that's one of the things that allows us to launch the evaluation, which means basically that we have to have that basic knowledge. We're also interested in the impacts of the projects, knowing that these are experiments, they are tests. So for the time being, we're not looking to have impacts on all of Montrealers, but rather these are all parts of experience, but there are still learnings that we can take away from that. So that's what we're in the process of evaluating right now. And of course, we were speaking about the capacity building. And so there's an evaluation committee, there's a community of practice as well that's been established, but also we have regular meetings with each of the partners to see where they come in with respect to evaluation. Also, in the first year, we mostly worked on better defining the theory of change with respect to the projects that are being supported by Montreal in Common. And the theory of change, I don't really have a slide on that because it's pretty complex, but it's available online. But that approach allowed us to guide our work, namely with respect to bringing together the data that was generated through the program. So that allowed us to really to have an overview of the program and the results. And finally, all of the evaluation work is aimed at pulling together recommendations, the recommendations that are implemented by the team at the Montreal Urban Innovation Laboratory, as well as our partners. Thank you. And Maxime, would you like to speak to us? What are the main learnings and challenges, namely with respect to the city? This is Maxime. So we had a program that we wanted to be collaborative, and it wanted to be centered on learning and the ability to be able to maintain continuous learning. So we looked at the tools that we had. We looked at the people who were working in public organizations, but we needed a number of stakeholders and organizations that had the ability to support us with this theory of change, namely with respect to questions based on the participatory evaluation. We wanted to be able to be supple, and as such, we needed recommendations that would allow us to be able to integrate learnings as we move forward. So we wanted to be able to have a series of loops throughout the programs, and we wanted to be able to be sure how we would do that. We thought a lot about how we could be clear on what are the evaluation questions that we need to ask in order to be able to have answers, in order to be able to make sure that the program was moving in the direction that we wanted, but also in order to be able to effect change. On that front, we also had to be able to obtain data from a number of very different projects with a lot of different evaluation cultures. So that's why we decided to set up a community of practice so that we could have common terminology, common approach, and we wanted to be able to have complementary evaluation processes. That was pretty basic, but also we wanted to be able to build capacity within the organizations on the evaluation programs. So also we wanted to make sure that people understood what questions should be asked. What was fundamental as well is that we developed an evaluation strategy that took into account recommendations during the planning phase. We wanted to make sure that the evaluation would allow continuous improvement. Very practically speaking, there were workshops with the partners and on the ground so that we were able to understand how we could improve the program in order to be able to reach our common goals, and then to define what our common goals were, and then to work with the Montreal Urban Innovation Laboratory and our partners to be able to work together to bring change so that we were able to better reach our goals. Did we need to make changes with respect to how we were working together or how we were following up on the projects? All of these different points of information allowed us to improve what we wanted to do, to be clear on what we needed to change with respect to the work that the partners were doing, namely with respect to food and mobility programs. This is Jean-Marie. Do you actually have an example of one of the changes that you would have made? This is Maxime. Yes, we looked at the ability to work together and to be able to gather data, common data. So we were able to improve our tools with respect to community of practice, namely with respect to the governance of data, but also we wanted to be able, we were able to adjust our goals. And we did that by listening to what were the partners' needs. And that allows our lab and others to adjust our approach with very clear recommendations. This is Jean-Marie. Yes, so pulling together common data. But I have another question for you, Maxime. I'm curious. Maybe it's still too early, but what was the impact with respect to the City of Montreal in a larger scale? have you seen an impact with respect to that participatory evaluation approach and also the evolutionary evaluation approach, or is it too early? We started to disseminate what we've been doing, says Maxime. We've been disseminate this with other organizations, other neighborhoods, and I see that there are a couple of colleagues that have been working in different areas and who are curious what we're doing in Montreal in Common with respect to evaluation. Of course, we have the participatory evaluation approach and an evolutionary evaluation approach that is a bit of an experiment. So we're still learning and adjusting on those two fronts. But thanks to our partners, Dynamo and our TIESS, we hope that what we're doing in Montreal in Common will be able to be reproduced elsewhere. Great. I have another question. So this is a project, or rather your program, that's complex because it involves a number of people. And you spoke about the fact that the partners are all very diverse. So what you're saying then is that this is a program, thanks to the evaluation program, that leads to a lot of learning, but I gather that there are a lot of challenges with respect to the implementation. So can you tell us a bit about the partners, and then for the city, what are the main learnings and main challenges actually of this program up until now? Well, you spoke about the first challenge, as Gabriel. Basically, it's the how hugely complex the program is. It's worth repeating a dozen of projects in mobility and food, and these projects are supported by data sets, but also within each of those projects, there are a number of programs that are programs within programs. I'm thinking of Salim, that is managed by Projet Récolte. When we said that there were 13 projects in Montreal in Common, that actually there are probably more like 30 because there are projects within projects. But for all of these people who are working in these projects at Gabriel, we say to them, you know what? You are part of a program. It's a program called Montreal in Common. And sometimes it can be hard to find, to navigate through the program. So with respect to evaluation, what we want to do is to be able to provide an overview of the program, not only for the team at the Urban Innovation Laboratory, but also the leaders of the various projects. And Maxime, what about you? The biggest challenge, other than what that Gabriel has mentioned, is yes, it's grouping partners around a common projects, because sometimes it's hard to gather people around a common vision, because some principles may bring more people together in some sense than others. But we shouldn't underestimate how this is a huge innovation in a public administration context. These approaches are based on learning and change, and very much based on trust. Trust with stakeholders who are external to the administration, and they're much more used to working in a corporate environment. This is not a tool that's very well established within public organizations. There are some exceptions, namely some federal departments, namely, for example, Foreign Affairs Canada, Global Affairs Canada. There are certain teams can be somewhat insecure, namely when they're faced with feedback from an external organization. but also there's a whole notion of controlling public funds. But sometimes the people mix up accountability and evaluation. So when we speak about accountability, there are other goals other than evaluation. So accountability is the control of expenditures, a control of quality, and we have to meet public administration objectives. But there are other advantages, for example, common learning, passing on our learnings, and these aren't necessarily practices that exist within the public sector, and that can create a bit of a culture clash with certain people. And the managers that I'm working with, we feel that there's more and more openness to that. For example, if we look at the project Montreal 2030, collaboration, the will to work together with external partners, and that's very much promoted by the organization. So we expect to see these types of evaluation approaches more and more within the municipal sector. The biggest challenge is to convince people to invest in evaluation. So, for example, the impacts on an organization, on the projects, all of that is huge, but the value that that can represent must be sold within the organization. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Maxime. So let's move to the questions from the participants. Actually, Carmen, do you have anything to add? Because we had mentioned another challenge on our slide. This is Carmen. Yes, no problem. There was a bit of a challenge that we wanted to speak about with respect to capacity building and evaluation of our partners. What we saw was that there was a huge diversity of people, of programs, so different terminology that was being used. So that we have partners that have been using agile methodology, so they have their own jargon, whereas other partners use rather work in the public or para-public sectors, and they have another terminology that they use. But then we arrived with our own vocabulary, our own terminology, namely with respect to participatory or evolutionary terminology. So we had to find a common ground so that we could understand each and other as to what we were talking about. So it takes a while to be able to find that right level where we can have a common discussion. Yes, yes. I asked Jamie actually to share the link to the TIESS website. There's information here in French and in English, and that speaks to vocabulary in French and in English. I gathered that you must have used this vocabulary, this terminology as well in your project. So Jamie has or will share this information. So we have a couple of questions with respect to the participants. I'll begin with a question that was asked by someone in my email, but I also have this question. So I'll start with this. So this is an innovative project that affects the citizens of Montreal. So we're talking about food and mobility. So I had a question for you. How did Montrealers and the people who have been involved in these projects, how were they involved in the evaluation? Was it through each of the individual projects? So how were the Montrealers involved in the participatory evaluation? Maybe I could launch an answer on that, says Maxime. For this, we very much use the information that each partner's evaluation, each partner had to put forward an evaluation to tell us what data they would be collecting in order to be able to measure the goals that they were hoping to obtain. So, for example, there are a number of neighborhood organizations that work very closely with Montrealers. But there's a lot of information that's needed in order to be able to understand how we have changed behaviors. And some organizations worked on that, but other organizations may not work directly with Montrealers, but rather with the community organizations that they work with. So they will have different evaluation methods. So in those situations, they will work with more organizations. And they will have a different type of information. So it's pretty different when we talk about the type of evaluations that are being led by the various projects. So it's really depends on the number of users of the projects. I was wondering whether Gabriel or Carmen would like to add something. This is Jean-Marie. Actually, I have another question. Anne-Marie is asking the following question. Do you have a map of the different projects, stakeholders that are involved in this project? Yes, it's coming, says Gabriel. One was used when the program was announced in 2020. It's not up to date, so we're preparing an up to date of that map, but I don't think that we have a date to tell you when that would be ready. This is Maxime. With respect to mapping of the projects, there's the theory of change of the program, and that we're able to show who the various actors are. But with respect to a geographic map, with respect to where the projects are taking place, that is in the process of being updated. And we hope that that will be available before the end of 2023 on our website. So earlier you spoke about the theory of change. In order to be able to have access to all of that information, what should we do? We, for example, register with Montreal in Common, register to have a regular copy of your newsletter. But Jamie will be putting the link to the newsletter on the chat section. Actually, it's pretty easy. It says Gabriel, rather says Maxime. All you have to do is to go to the website for Montreal in Common, and you'll see that you can register for a newsletter. It's not quite ready, says Gabriel, but there is a platform that will be launched on November 30th. It's called En Commun. And on that, there's a module called Praxis. And all of the partners in Montreal in Common will be invited to add what their main learnings are so that we're able to share those learnings. So that will be launched soon, and that will be a platform where we will be able to bring together all of the documentation that's related to Montreal in Common. That's great. We'll go see that, says Jean-Marie. There's another question from Anne-Marie. So what are the main recommendations that you have been able to identify up until now? Are you able to give us a couple of examples of some of the recommendations? A couple of recommendations that related to the evaluation. So speaking about high-level recommendation is a little difficult, but in the beginning, there were 17 recommendations from the first report, and then subsequent to that, there were 15 recommendations. They're quite clear. And these recommendations are public. You can see what they are, but they involve a small number of people who are working directly with the program. Generally speaking, it's to be able to clarify the expectations with respect to principles associated with the program, or to review how the abilities, the capacity can be supported, or invite an organization to launch a webinar to explain their work. It's also important to say that beyond recommendations, the evaluation allows us to have data and analysis of data that have been sent to us by the partners. That allows us to see, have we reached our objectives with respect to the theory of change, and what changes do we need to bring forward in order to meet those objectives? So how can we mobilize the community in order to be able to reach our goals with respect to access to food, in terms of mobility, and also with respect to data governance? Gabriel, you wanted to speak about the platform, but there is a question here. Have you started to think about how you promote the results and how you can disseminate the information? So Gabriel spoke to us about the platform, but there are other ways that this information will be disseminated in the short and medium term. So you want to talk about data parties, says Maxime. This is Carmen. Yes. At the end of each loop, we have data parties or festivals that we organize with our partners. So during those events, we're able to share our main conclusions, our main recommendations, and we're able to discuss these with all of their partners, but as well all of the members of the Urban Innovation Lab. So this is something that we do at the end of each loop, at the end of each evaluation loops. Otherwise, the results are shared, they're disseminated on that platform that we spoke about earlier, Praxis, and also disseminated to all of the partners and also to the Urban Innovation Lab. What we want to be able to do with Praxis, says Gabriel, is to be able to have a legacy. The program will come to an end, but there can still be something at the end of it. So what will be left are the learnings, and that's where the impact will be in the long term, and it will allow us as well to be able to reach specialized groups of people. We're not necessarily trying to communicate with Montrealers in general, but rather communities of people working in food and mobility, but also who are working in various public services, namely the employees who are working in other departments of the City of Montreal. So there will be other measures that we will be taking in order to disseminate our information in the future. So obviously your presentations have generated a lot of questions. So can you give us an example of participatory evaluations, participatory evaluation rather, that was led by you or by one of the partners? There are a number of tests that were led with the users. So for example, the association called locomotion in order to be able to improve the platform. But in other circumstances, of course, there are other activities, for example, workshops and focus groups in the food sector to see how those partners can improve these solutions related to access to food. We also send surveys out, but with respect to participatory evaluation measures, what we do is that we use activities, workshops of collaborative work. So, and this has to do with respect to evaluation, and we worked with Dynamo on that. We also want to be able to have collective processes with respect to recommendations on how to improve the program. We want to be able to obtain feedback from our partners as well, and we get that feedback through workshops. Maxime has started to explain how the projects in their evaluation process can be participatory, but in our work, it's really at the participative analysis stage that partners are not just providing input, we also share with them the results that we've seen up until then. So we provide an image of what is taking place, and they will be able to develop their own recommendations for the future of the program. I would like to add something else, says Carmen. In the 13 projects, there's also one project that is the evaluation of the food partners, and that's being led by the environmental transition chair. And they've done a fair amount of work with the partners in the food sectors. They've been working on a theory of change for the food sector. They have developed a number of indicators in order to be able to evaluate a whole series of factors within the food sector. So all of that is taking place as well within the program. I have another question, and we still have a bit of time. So if you're ready to continue, we can continue. Do you know if other cities in Canada who are participating in the in the smart cities projects have had similar experience or different experience? Yes, there's Guelph, the city of Guelph, that had a project related to food, but Nunavut as well had an innovative project with respect to the to suicide prevention. And then Bridgewater in Nova Scotia, I think there was also a project related to access to food. But there have been few opportunities for the cities that have been part of the Smart Cities project to get together. So to be honest, I don't really know what has taken place elsewhere. So a last question. Can you give us an example of data governance according to real needs? So, for example, having access to a healthy food or ecological transition within a neighborhood. With respect to data governance, there are a number of projects that have been set up, and these projects are related both to the access to food project as well as the mobility project. And two of the organizations were able to work together in order to be able to promote and use data related to mobility in Montreal. So on that front, we're in the process of really analyzing data that will serve all of the collaborators, the partners in the food sector. Also, we want to be able to look at the interoperational capacity of various partners for them to be able to work together. But there are also data generation. So there's a question that we are asking ourselves. So how do we manage that data in a responsible way? But also within the programs in the food sector, we are looking to be able to bring together data and indicators so that we were able to have a common evaluation in order to promote our ability to see where the needs are in the food sector, to see as well what the positive results in the mobility sector. So there's a whole network of partners in Montreal in common that are working together to be able to promote and share data. We have also been promoting the sharing of tools such that organizations in Montreal are in a better position to manage their data and also to share their data. So the impact on that front will be sustainable. Yes, and I think that people can go on your platform as well to register for your newsletter to see the evolution of data sharing, et cetera, in the future. So there are a lot of questions as well. So I'd like to thank participants for your questions. So somebody else said, I think that other smart cities would really benefit from knowing what is being done in Montreal. That's true, actually. So I think that we have basically answered all the questions. So I have a question for all of the three of you to close the session today. A question that's directly related to your experience. What are the things that we should keep in mind? What do you retain when you're in the process of evaluating innovation? What would be your one or two pieces of advice that you would like to share when working in innovation? I This is Carmen. Well, remain flexible, remain open to what's taking place, because it's great to be able to plan an evaluation approach based on questions that we ask at the beginning of an evaluation loop. It's possible that other needs will that could be added throughout the process, and other questions could be added, and therefore others could be less of a priority. So it's really important to work with the innovators and in order to be able to adjust the evaluation strategy. Yes, and also the uh, evolutionary approach that allows you to maintain all of these loops of information. Well, when we're involved in experiments at Maxim, we have to set aside our our expert hat, and we have to be able to listen to people in order to be able to hear input from our partners. So I think that's really fundamental to any evol evolution evolutionary assessment. And I think that that's one of the approaches that we need to make sure that we apply here in Montreal and comment. So I'm still thinking about the question, says Gabrielle. As part of this mandate, we're actually not evaluating innovation. We're evaluating programs that will support innovation. What we tried to do, and maybe I can't provide this as a piece of advice, but rather I have a question that I'm asking myself right now. We should look at the conditions that allow evaluation to take place rather than allow innovation to take place. Is there an organizational culture that is open to that? Is there a level of maturity within the organizations that is at the proper level? Is there the appropriate level of flexibility that will allow that? So all of those elements are associated with the organizational culture, and all of those factors need to be examined in order to be asked to see whether or not this is a good innovative program. And to follow up on what Gabriel said, says Maxime, even within the city, the fact that Montreal in Common has been supporting pilot projects and that we see results from a pilot project, that's not always well understood. For example, when we present results from a pilot project, it's not the same as results from a project that has been launched at a much wider scale in Montreal. So we have to take that into account, that we're dealing here with pilot projects. And what decision makers need to understand is that learnings are as important as the results. Because in a pilot projects, we're able to see what the potential is to scale up some of those projects, but allows us as well to gain information with respect to management. And these learnings will allow us to understand which learnings can be scaled up and which will be useful and may be successful in a larger scale. Sometimes there are some projects that simply don't work out, but the learnings that we took away from those projects are more significant, because if they are transferred, it allows the City of Montreal and its partners to not reproduce the same areas. The other thing that we didn't speak a lot about today is how do we transfer those learnings to other sectors? It's important for us to be able to disseminate the results on praxis, in webinars, and in other ways as well. And the partners understand that. The partners understand the importance, the significance of sharing that information. So if I retain what you're saying from all three of you, so the importance of having a trial and error culture. So I would like to thank all of you for being with us today. It was really incredible to hear all of you today, Carmen, Gabriel, and Maxime. I hope that we'll have other opportunities to hear what you have to say, to hear about what's happening in your project. So thank you again to all of you. That will be the end of our webinar, and good luck for the next steps. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today.